Because when you're going to face a new school year, the preparation and the charting and so on is, performance anxiety. Some students facing exams will have that same issue of performance anxiety. So can I cope? Can I manage this? Can I manage the workload? And so for the teachers going in, they are there to teach and they are doing their work. They are also parents, so they also experience the anxiety of their own child and the different attending needs. And so some of these augmented stresses could explain what you read about earlier, where some of these are gone unnoticed, or they're trying to cope without complaining, and then all of a sudden it was too much strain to bear, and then the system give out. Usually it's a cardiac response.
And an acute situation that we see teachers facing in recent times is a violent classroom. When a teacher gets ready to go to school, on top of everything else, they are preparing to go to war. They're walking into a battlefield where they can get hurt, they are disrespected, on top of everything else. But just this acute situation, where now they're walking into that.
Right.
What does that do? I mean, I know you're not a psychiatrist, but on top of everything else, you're thinking about this as you walk into the classroom or get ready to go into the classroom.
Right. So, as we say, the teacher is a parent, a human being. They are facing the same issues, financial stresses, etc. Now, having their own children, that they are going through the parent stress, so the professional stress, the parental stress, the financial stress, and then the stressful condition at the workplace. So that's a lot of successive stress on a daily basis. It's bound to take its toll. Now, to retract from that, we'd have to now ask, why is the environment and the students violent in their behavior? And that would carry us right back to communities from whence they came, because violence is a normal order of the day for conflict resolution in their communities, and so they are acting normally as per their community. And so you could see the connectivity between these things. So now the school becomes a microcosm of the wider society, which would be a kind of a mosaic, because not all students would come from a similar background or environment.
So this is a space now where gang warfares are being played out, where political tribalism played out, where
by proxy.
Entertainment divisions are being played out, who's siding with that and who's siding with that person. And so we see all these different types of violence, but the reality is frightening for other students, for teachers, for parents, and the community generally. So we've got, and I know we're going to deal with solutions, and we're saying this as we're saying it, but I can't help but think that we're not even exaggerating. I mean, this is the reality.
No, and to something that you have brought up before is the impacts on the students now of also the digital platforms and the bullying and etc. So when you take this into account, this is a new factor that, sometimes plays out in real life, when they are in face-to-face.
I am very concerned about this social media bullying that plays out right in physically, because it's all playing out physically, which we're not aware of in the way that we need to be. But whether it plays out physically or not, there are so many students who are who enter depressive phases and prolonged depression, I think, young people, because of social media bullying, and that we are not even aware of. Parents are not necessarily aware of it. Teachers are not necessarily aware of it. But you see this behavior in the student. How do you respond to that? It seems to me as if we need a whole new response, but a whole new a paradigm shift in how we deal with the spaces of education on the island, from kindergarten to high school. I know we need to go university, but I'd focus on that block for now, in terms of how we deal with social media and social media bullying. I think we are seriously behind time. There's a lot of catching up to do.
Right,
this, yeah.
definitely. And you mentioned a very important point, that exposure to this type of anxiety, and that is persistent and they're not able to resolve it, will oftentimes result in depression. So it's in the opposite, seem like the opposite scale, but they often travel side by side, straddle each other. And so in the depressive phase, also, they will be more probably reclusive. There will be change in behavior, not uninterested in their schoolwork or decreased performance. And if that phase goes unnoticed, sometimes along with what you're saying, augmented by bullying and other issues such as those, other social issues, without intervention can lead to self-harm.
Exactly, and this is what we're facing, and this is a global situation right now that I think there's just so much work to be done. I think we need a paradigm shift, and I am not seeing it. Even as we go into the school year, I'm listening to the Minister of Education. I hear what's coming out of the JTA conference. I see what's happening generally, and I'm not necessarily seeing the paradigm shift. But there has to be a serious paradigm
shift. Yeah. Definitely. If we should look at another stakeholder in this whole back-to-school condition that is also prone to be victims of anxiety, we look at those who are in commuting, so the bus drivers, the taxi drivers, etc.
This is critical. Hold it. Let me take a quick break and come to that.
It's mosquito time.
These are those in commuting.
Right.
Including those who are transporting students. But commuters generally, including the students.
Yes.
What a rough life.
Yes.
What a rough life. I think, I'm not quite sure what the situation is in Kingston. I know that there are buses on the road that are on routes and so on that have some kind of dedication to taking students to school. But I know that what I see with my own eyes in this part of the world, it is crazy mad. And if our students are going back to this very same thing, oh, Father Abraham, what we Christians are who lend out money gratis. He was a man in whom I had absolute trust. That's all I can say. It is crazy.
Well, that is right, because, for example, the taxi drivers, the bus drivers, some of them are assigned, like have a fixed route and fixed student cohort that they will carry. But they themselves are humans and they're in the society. They are prone to the influences of their communities, and also they have their own stresses and anxieties. So if this plays out when you're driving, because the number of vehicles on the Jamaican roadway now, you see it is untenable. There is nowhere to park. There's no little room for overtaking because the density of the traffic is so high. The drivers are running not to be late and trying to pull out early ahead and so. So if for some reason they have a concentration lapse, which is one of the side effects of anxiety, then you have a terrible accident with serious, consequences, unfortunately can lead even as far as loss of life or disabilities that would arise from those things.
You know what I'm thinking as I talk to you is that somebody who is not living in Jamaica, people who are living or listening overseas who do not have the Jamaican experience might be saying to themselves, but why are you pointing out all of these things? The thing about it that we need to make clear is that we're talking about the norm. This is not the exception. We're talking about the norm. What happens, everything you hear us talk about this morning is a norm. This is what happens for our parents, our students, our teachers, our commuters, regardless of who you are in terms of commuting on the road. We are talking about the norm as we look forward to another school year where we are expecting the best out of all of us.
Yes.
coming through all of this. It's an interesting thing. So we're going to talk a little bit now about, in this segment of the program, about how, are we through it? Do you have anything else to say before we move?
These things, they're very critical. For example, transport and commuting. The long and short is we expect that for a successful outcome, it requires the safety and the security of the all involved, but in particular the students, since we focus on them for the most part. But at the same time, other issues around them would affect their safety, their health, and their performance. Not least of which is arriving at school safely, because sometimes there's racing on the road with the minibuses, the taxis and all like these. They're also hustling to make ends meet. And so we have a very, dangerous mosaic of activity. And
the way people are transported, where we have still the kind of it's almost like a slavery situation where people are packed into taxis, packed into buses.
Yes.
Because everybody's trying to get to where they're going, and there are repercussions if you go late, whether it is to your work or to school. There are parents who are dropping off students and then still have to go to school because you don't have nobody else to drop off a student to school and so on. And then there are children, young children, who are too young to be making the journeys up by themselves.
Right.
That's another situation. So the society, we need a gentler, kinder society. And that's going to take us to community and the paradigm shift that we're talking about. But this commitment to another way of doing things. And you are underscoring that there is another way to do this, Dr. Green, which is where we want to go to after this break.
You didn't know that Jamaica's unemployment rate is at its lowest ever?
When we vote in Jamaica, once we reach a voting age, what are we voting for? What are we asking our leaders to do? They are entrusted through our votes and our taxes and so on to carry out a duty as servants to us, really. And so the paradigm shift we're talking about also has to come from us in terms of what we expect and what we demand from those parliamentarians, those we put in elect to take charge and to lead the process of development then. I think even when we think about education, the way education is being delivered in Jamaica, the whole system has been failing for so long that, I remember having a discussion with Amina a few weeks ago and asking if it's a deliberateness. There's a deliberateness about it. Why is it allowed? Why is it being allowed to continue in this vulgar manner for so long? But you're seeing a way that we can address this, and you're saying, well, let us return to ourselves, Sankofa, and look at what we have.
Right.
And so you're looking at Ubuntu.
Right. That Ubuntu principle definitely is part of the solution. And as you said, society, we have to understand the concept of society as community. We have to make them synonymous in this case. And the major components and the players that you mentioned about the state itself, and the role that they have to play. Well, the truth is this: if we should observe, Jamaica is unique in some senses, in terms of the fact that this is a society that took from the U.S. their motto of "E pluribus unum," out of many one. Mm-hmm. This is not our reality here. Mm-hmm. And
that we need to say that's not our motto. That was taken from the United States.
Right.
That's not ours.
And so what is the reality on the ground in Jamaica? Mm-hmm. We have to look, because community evolves out of a cultural context. Mm-hmm. Now, for the most part, Jamaica is a mosaic with 95% Africans here. We have the Chinese and the Indians and Jews and etc. And for the most part, we have seen that whether the Chinese came here recently or as immigrants, as incentive workers, they maintain their cultural connection. And so that gives them a sense of community that facilitates them in their behavior as a group. Mm-hmm. The same thing applies to the Indians. So the cultural background and framework is missing from the masses of us. So what goes and passes for culture depends on where you are. So the culture in St. Elizabeth will be different from that in Kingston, different from that in St. Mary in St. Anne, in Trelawney. So everybody, there is no
There's
understanding.
subcultures. There's subcultures.
And there is an absence of a genuine culture, because that cultural framework is necessary, that there is a point of connection, of convergence. And that now will set the stage to have some discipline and control over communities in general. Well, that is absent, and this is where the Ministry of Education particularly has a pivotal role to play.
Yeah.
Because the textbooks does not reflect the African culture in any form when the masses of the people are Africans.
Right. And there's also a deliberateness in that.
Yes.
Because we're talking about 1962 to now, where we just celebrated independence, so-called independence. But look at the system of education. Look at the curriculum, which we're still fighting with to be more inclusive of us, of we, the masses of the people.
Definitely, that has to be one of the critical part of the reformation that is necessary to bring about changes and the evolution of community and the community impact on the wider society. And for the simple reason that without a pivotal or a compass, a guideline in which to follow, we are not going to have a sense of self, a sense of value, a sense of worth, a sense of importance. So the textbooks will specifically talk about the Tainos, they will talk about the Indians and the Chinese, and then they come and they mention Jamaicans. So there is a disconnect, or a deliberate disconnect in the curriculum, so that the person out here, if you actually say we are Africans, many persons are actually offended because they say, no, we are Jamaicans.
Yes. Yes.
So they are taking on just a nationality and not realizing.
And they will look for the 1% or 0.001% of Chinese and foreground that.
Right.
If that is there. And this is, I think, part of the greater and the wider problem that we have, which is a disconnect from ourselves. So that we have not defined the Jamaican, and we cannot define the Jamaican without defining the African. It's impossible to define the Jamaican without defining the African, and this is
true.
The curriculum.
That is true, because at the end of the day, the Chinese is also Jamaican, as is the Indian.
Yes.
But beyond the nationality, the ethnicity is important, because cultures evolve and have their differences based upon the race. So if we are detached from ourselves, we will never be whole. And when you are fractionized, then you are more prone to anxiety, to violence, and to a lack of commitment to anything.
So there is a pride that we hear when Jamaicans who are Chinese Jamaicans identify their Chinese heritage.
Right.
There is a pride that we hear from Indians, or Indian Jamaicans identify their Indian heritage.
Correct.
There is an active agenda to take from or to devalue the African Jamaican, so that he or she feels no pride in identifying as such. But what is the importance of understanding that African identity, of identifying that African identity in the wider context of the issues we're discussing here? How do we fix some of the problems that we currently face in the classrooms, on the way to school, in the homes and in the community?
Right. So any cursory visitation or revisiting of African cosmology will show us how the community operates. So, first of all, there is a respect for elders. The elders have lived for several generations, and they are venerated, and they have their wisdom, which is passed on from one group to the next. First of all, there is naming. So when a child is born, the wise elders will look at the child, and when they look and peer into his future, they will name him appropriately so that his name becomes his purpose.
So there are rites of passage. This idea of the rites of passage, where the community is responsible for that process as the child goes through the different phases of development.
Right. So from that very moment, the word, sound, and power in your name reminds you on a daily basis of your purpose. And so because persons are purposefully planted, then the community evolves around it, because you have those who are for guardians, those who are nurturing, those who are hunting, those who are building, and so on. So that is how we have the evolution of a community. So just to be grown up ad hoc here and there with no connection, no connectivity to nothing, no knowledge of self, and the whole principle of Ubuntu and Kemetic cosmology is that all things and everybody are connected and related at some point. And that knowledge allows you now to know how to interact. So to harm the individual and so around you would be the last thing on your agenda. That would not come.
It's also to harm yourself. And the thing about it is that it works now, because we see how this work in certain societies. In North Africa, for example, where elders are revered, and we're talking about a whole different culture, right? But I'm still identifying that, just in case people are saying, but this doesn't work. There's interconnectedness. I mean, we were in Egypt the other day, and we are still. I had to say something to you in the taxi one time, because we were in the taxi in the middle of a crowd. We would come to a stoplight where in Egypt each road have how much highway, how much lane?
5, 6, 7
in one direction. And 5, 6, 7 the same direction. That's one road. Yes. And so we're at this massive intersection where the stoplight not working, and it is what you call it something another neck. What you call it again? Bottleneck. When everything jam up right there, so.
Yes.
And nobody was arguing with anybody. People were just taking their time.
Very calm.
And the sun was hot it was like 40 degrees. Yes. With the tires literally melting off the cars. and people were just going through, and some even have time to stop and wave. Right. And we with our Jamaican selves, because that is what we were in terms of the culture that we did carry this. Well, you, not me, was saying, but where's he going? But you go there. And then, and the driver is just laughing.
Right.
Because he's not in that frame of mind at all. And nobody's in that frame of mind. And it's not a one-off.
Yes.
It is because what we notice going back and forth over time is that these people see the interconnectedness between themselves and the person in the next car.
Right.
And understand that they are brothers and sisters. Yes. And so that there is no animosity at that level. It's phenomenal. You have to experience that to see that. Right. We are coming from that very same space. I remember that kind of a community. I grew up in such a community.
Right.
So it is not.
There is a breakdown. So after 62 years, we have seen very little progress in that. And I think after repeated calls, something has to be definitely done. It has to be considered that the solution has to come from an inclusivity, an inclusion in the curriculum of the African-centered culture.
Yes.
Including rituals, language, and so on, and to embrace these so that it will give individuals a sense of belonging, a sense of pride. So in other words, you would have little bad mind concept. So if somebody achieves something, like if we have an achievement from Bolt or Shellyan, these act as inspiration for us.
Yeah.
So we are inspired. So it's nothing to bad mind the person's achievements. You use it as something inspirational to...
Your achievement is my achievement because your achievement is going to benefit the community.
Right.
And so whether you go and come, when you come, you belong to the community.
Right.
And it's not just you, so other people begrudge you and tear you down. So if you post a video with your Benz, a man come tear down your house, as we see happening in Geisel. And this idea that people grudge you for what you have. But a lot of this mentality of people grudge you for what you have and people bad mind and so on, that's coming even from the very top, because we hear that from the mouth of the Prime Minister. So this paradigm shift that we're talking about is a holistic paradigm shift. That it's a nation that has to be guided through this process of the paradigm shift, somebody who can articulate that as a vision of who we can be, our best selves.
Right. So we have to now enter a paradigm where persons are valued, not necessarily based on their academic or scholastic achievements or their financial prowess, but they must be held accountable for their moral consciousness and obligation and mindfulness of community and those around us. So
that if somebody robs up the Ministry of Education, for example, or whether the case is in court and the person is being investigated, the Minister of Education shaking that person's hand at a conference is sending the wrong message to young people, is sending the wrong message to the same young minds that we're talking about. How that go? Is that okay then? There is just so much. So once again, we go back to the paradigm and where the shift has to come from and where it has to take place. It has to be a simultaneous, across the board, holistic thing that we agree on,
right,
as a nation.
Yes, definitely. If we look at the role of, because we are saying back to school, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, that has to be seen in close conjunction with the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yes.
Because these two things are critically things, and so that we take more control over food security, so that, no child or family anywhere, having such a small population, less than 3 million, should go to bed hungry for no reason at all. And, certain things, we don't know the principles of them, but the private sectors, it is a known fact that, for example, many hotels dump tons of food on a daily basis. Why aren't these channeled to the institutions where persons could benefit from them, for example?
So then you're pointing us to, it's a long-term solution, short-term solutions in terms of the food and so on.
Yes.
And agriculture, with the Ministry of Health and also the Ministry of Education. And then long-term to look at, principles, African principles, and we know that we have the Ubuntu pedagogy, which is well articulated. We had one of our sisters who has done a PhD in this, written a book about it. She was on with me a few weeks, if you remember, talking about how that is a different way of teaching to the Western way that we know, and then how that could impact the behavior of students in the classroom and on the school compound, even when we're talking about violence against each other, student on student violence.
Right. Definitely. So what we know now is we have preventative measures, as prophylaxis, as you would say, that can be taken.
Yes.
And in different aspects. So just, for example, as how safe vaccines, for example, are given to children to protect them from certain communicable diseases. We know that the importance of proper sanitation and hydration, very important in these times, are especially hot, and coming not just from the heat, but we're talking, we are in a cycle now of more frequent solar flares and, coronal mass ejection. Right. So we notice a lot of persons now suffering from dehydration. Now, when you're in the older age group or the younger age group, 5-year-old and less, these are more critical to life, because the sudden dehydration can result in cardiopulmonary distress.
So you're talking about the extent to which children are rehydrated at school now. Now we're looking at straight health and how you survive through the day.
Through the day, yes. So sanitation, hydration, and nutrition. Right. Those access to these are vital.
I know nutrition is really a sticking point because of what is available on school compounds, because of what parents can afford, so in terms of whether or not you're able to take your lunch to school. But then again, when you get to school, what is available, what you have access to. Because if fruits are available I guarantee you children will buy fruits, regardless of what they say. But if it's going to be all, fizzy drinks and sweet stuff and artificial cheesy stuff, which they get addicted to.
Right.
They're going to continue to buy this. But at least an option, I think is critical. These discussions have been going on forever in terms of the need for proper nutrition for school. It takes me back to the article that was published in the paper on World Physical Activity Day that says, in an age dominated by screens and sedentary lifestyles, the call for physical activity has never been more urgent, especially for our school-age children. The mental, physical, and cognitive benefits of physical activity have been unequivocally proven. Yet there remains a glaring deficit in physical activity opportunities within schools, particularly in the regions like the Caribbean, including Jamaica, where the burden of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, looms large over public health systems. And it goes on to talk about the national policy that is needed, the proposed Jamaica School Nutrition Policy that could help to facilitate more physical activity opportunities for generations to come. An interesting article that was published on World Physical Activity Day. It's also a very long one, so persons can go out and read it. But it goes right to what you're saying. Yes.
Right. It's very relative. Yeah. Because this is not only boosting their immune system, right, but also, helping their cognitive skills, better performance. Yeah,
because it says the fourth high-level meeting on NCDs will be held in 2025, where heads of governments will assess the progress of 9 voluntary global targets for the prevention and control of NCDs, including physical activities. And then it goes on to talk about what priority should be given to building awareness, to active environments, continuous monitoring and evaluation, and so on. And for adults, including teachers, parents, and community leaders, to serve as positive role models by prioritizing their own physical activity and demonstrating its importance through their actions. It goes on to say that the time to act is now. It's a pretty interesting article.
Right. So that is very interesting and very relevant. So we hope that there will be positive compliance with those principles. And in our own settings, when we finger a lot of the stress related to, fiduciary stresses, financial stresses, and the increased high cost of living, right? These are important issues that, I guess we have to get more persons, able to sustain themselves. Employment opportunities, very important, and proper remuneration, very important, because these will now impact how people are able to clear their bills and debts and also sustain themselves and their families.
Coming out of the JTA conference, I think the newly installed president of the Jamaica Teachers Association, Dr. Mark Smith, told Education Minister Favour Williams on August 19 that teachers, if compensated, would not opt to migrate in droves in search of greener pastures. He was speaking at the presidential address during he was delivering the presidential address during the investiture ceremony at the 60th annual JTA conference. And he says, how in 2024 is this low wage for teachers still a struggle in Jamaica? Minister, most of our teachers will stay if they are better paid. Our schools are struggling to keep pace with the migration of high school teachers. Also in primary schools, we are losing science, technology, and mathematics teachers. Our present reality is a precarious one at best. Despite possessing the local capacity within our teacher training institutions, we are seeing dwindling numbers. The profession is just not attractive. He says we have to change that dynamic, which is the point you're making.
Oh, that is most urgent. That is most urgent.
Yeah. Also, I want to point to we were talking about violence in school coming out of the conference. Also, the Jamaica Teachers Association president also called for a new approach to solving the challenge of violence in schools. He was speaking to reporters at the conference. He noted that the issue cannot be approached in silos, as it's a reflection of challenges in the wider society. I think this is a very point that you're underscoring this morning.
Right. This is where the community comes into play, and its socio-economical impact on the members of the community, of that community, including children.
He said there must be a broader national campaign focused on reculturing Jamaicans. And this, I see this is a point you were making, and even when we talk about how important culture is. While acknowledging that a comprehensive solution will take time, Dr. Smith said schools must focus on teaching children emotional intelligence. Yes. He explained that behaviors exhibited by children at school often reflect breakdowns in the home. This is why the home is important. This is why the community is important.
It's important, right. Because in cases where there are, in the African setting, deficiencies in individual homes, that is compensated for by the community inclusivity that takes up the slack. So, there's no child without shelter or food at any time.
Yes, community. We can't underscore community enough. If there's anything you want to take away, let's spend some time talking, because we started here and we want to wrap up this segment here, which is to talk a little bit more about the importance of community and how even because apparently we said just now, the multidimensional, multifaceted way that this is to be done, and how you had mentioned earlier to this holistic way that this is to be addressed. But community every time is at the center of that.
It has to be at the center because the country is small and divided into, let us say, a number of parishes and so on. But in some larger zones, bigger, Africa is vast and other continents are vast. And so communities naturally evolve and you don't have that mass migration from area to area. So people grow up in a stable setting and they have a set of behavioral patterns that guide them until they now interact with other persons. Mm-hmm. Now, where there is an absence of a definite cultural cohesiveness or pattern, there are no guidelines, and so people migrate here and there, and they become influenced and adopt anything. So what we have in the place of a community is really chaos. Mm. So it's a matter of... Where do we
go from here? Community or chaos? Chaos or community?
It is chaos. So the action you describe on the road, the rat race, the yelling of bad words at each other and the aggressiveness, all of these are normal, what you'd call uncoordinated behavior that would result in a society that has no principles to tell you to be calm, to take a deep breath, to use a different approach. Yeah. Yes, so something is missing. Leaderfulness. Because if you watch on a Sunday morning on the television stations, or listen or going to any church, even the pastor, even those who are preaching, they're angry. Them literally bawl out them throat rollers and what I say. They're talking so loudly and they're shouting at you, and there's so much judgment in that space. And if you check Parliament, them cussing each other and throwing things at each other, and it's a whole rabble-rousing space. And then if you check, the classroom, is the same thing as we talk about the violence. If you check in the home, if you check in so wherever we are, we have become so angry that somebody has to say, let us stop and take a deep breath. Right.
And this is what I think, even within the classroom, that the Ubuntu pedagogy does, because it allows for the students when they come in to have that space for meditation, but also that space for community, which is school community. And this is critical to how the Ubuntu pedagogy has developed and evolved over time. It is not difficult for the Ministry of Education to tap into that, because there is so much research and publications and active implementation of the Ubuntu pedagogy. across the African diaspora and Africa.
Right.
It's really not difficult to tap into. If everything else failed, if all has failed already,
Yes.
then let us try something we have never tried before then. Let us try ourselves.
I agree. And as I say, the school is really a microcosm of the wider society. And to some degree, the schools try their best to instill some form of discipline and self-respect in the students. However, at the end of the day, when they resort to their own communities, there is no reinforcement. Right. And because of that, it's the effect is null and void, literally.
And so we have had these conversations so often, Dr. Green, that it boggles the mind. We have been saying it for years in this space. So many persons who have come in this space, we hear it coming from every single JTA president. Here's a new one making the same speech. So the same speech is being made over and over again. What it tells me is that we know what to do. The problem now, or the challenge now, is to do it.
Right. I think also the whole concept of what we would call assessment. The assessment, and how we view what are the parameters for success. As you say, the success, individual success is all well and good, but it should not exist in isolation, because that is where the principle of communities is so important. So, for example, just on a scale of simple common sense, conscience, or morality, for lack of a better word, the banking system and the private sector that continue year after year to rake in 100 and 200, 300% profits margins should just logically think that, let us provide scholarships for students. The population of Jamaica is so small that with the slightest help, we could actually eradicate poverty, unemployment in all of these sectors, such as
I think they will tell you that they provide scholarship for students. You're saying that it should be more students. You're saying,
yes. In other words, they would pick up the slack where it cannot, because if we look, our history is continuous since independence and before independence. You're trying to play catch up, and it's almost impossible, because in the beginning you were not given, since emancipation, you were not given any land, so you had no asset even for subsistence. You were unemployed for the most part, and the investment for the most part is in jails and so on. So they expect to keep your numbers down and keep you in this subjugation. So there has to be a mindset from the highest level that why isn't Jamaica another Singapore where there is no unemployment, zero? It's not impossible, but they are trying to use certain cliches like, the poor will always be with us, and that type of mindset is negative.
Yeah. And the neoliberal agenda is ensuring that it doesn't function. Capitalism, as we've heard so many times in this space, cannot survive without the poor will always be with us. And if you're going to maintain this capitalist system and this neoliberal agenda, then you're going to do everything in your power. So as long as we realize that, let us then start from our families, our communities, to begin to make the change, while we hold those responsible, those who are in charge of the systems that guarantee education and health and social welfare and so on, that we hold them responsible. And I think we can only do this through people power. At some point, we are going to have to, as a people, demand more from the system.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This is what we're gonna wrap. I'm gonna give you the final word.
What can be done realistically? We know things take time and effort, but really and truly, in our country, the reality of Jamaica is what can be done by the arbiters of governance. With all the massive acres of crown land, each family can be given a plot of land so that at least you can eke out a subsistence. You won't have to be calling people squatters. And if you are given a plot of land, you have access to health and education, then you have a framework in which you will be more communal, your contribution will be significant and relative, self-sustenance, national sustenance, and in this type of general Ubuntu principle, then the society and our nation as a whole can progress.
The interconnectedness of all of us. Thank you so much, Dr. Arthur Green. This is where we're wrapping it for this morning. And this discussion, we have just about half an hour to go inside of the program, but we're wrapping the discussion right now. Thank you so much, Arthur, for coming in.
Thank you.